In the last video I made, there were quite a few things that we got up and running. One of the main ones being that we are now able to move around our player and rotate the camera. Now, there are a few quirks, and I'll get into that in a second, but the main thing I wanted to focus on in this video is being able to interact with the things that we have in our environment. Starting to get things set up like being able to grab guns and use them, being able to grab simple blocks and hold them in our hands, and simple things like that. Now, none of this is overly complicated by any means, but it is definitely going to be interesting to get set up. With that, let's go and jump right into the video and I'll show you exactly how we're going to get this going. Now, before we actually get into interacting anything, there was actually an issue that I'd run into in the last video, and I actually got a recommendation that might actually fix this. It's not overly complicated, and it was actually due to an oversight on my part. When I created the character, we actually used a pawn. You can actually see right up here, we used a parent class of type pawn. Now, looking back on it, this probably didn't make a lot of sense and probably wasn't the smartest thing to do for a couple of reasons. One of the main ones being that some of the things that we're using here are actually included in the character class and might just end up working a little bit better in a character and might actually incorporate things like gravity and things like that. And this was actually pointed out that why am I using a pawn and not a character? I've used characters before, and I'll be honest, I think I just wasn't thinking things through when I started setting this up, and so I ended up defaulting to a pawn. Now our character, by comparison, not too much different. We end up with a capsule component, an additional air component, and a mesh component, as well as a character movement component. So we might actually be able to set up movement a little bit better as well. Now, because of this, this is actually very simple to get fixed, and I'm going to show you, in case there are any issues, I can show you exactly how we're going to fix them. If we come right into our BP base player, go right into class settings, we can change our parent class from a pawn to a character. Now, this might cause a few small issues. We're going to work through those a little bit, so let's go ahead and see here. And it did. Okay, so first things first, let's get our camera attached to the new capsule component, our motion controller root attached to the new capsule component as well, and we can delete the capsule that we originally had. Actually, before we delete it, let me do this. Let's do a find references by name. And if we find all the references, I just want to come through and I want to change all of the references that we have here. Now, this should be pretty easy. We should just be able to drag and drop this over and it should just replace all of our components. So if we just come right in there, change that one, capsule component here, change that one, right over here to capsule, and then capsule here, and capsule here. And I think that is all good. So we can go and take that. Now we should be able to delete the capsule. Let me go and delete it. Oh, this is why. Okay, the on component. I'm actually going to delete that for a second. I don't actually know that this will still be necessary, so I'm going to delete that. And what I'm actually going to do as well, I want to simulate this real quick and just see if we now have gravity somewhat working. So let's do this. I'm going to move this up, and we're just going to go ahead and hit simulate. Okay, well, good news, we do have our gravity now working. Okay, so gravity, the reason it wasn't working, make sure simulate physics is checked. A couple things we are going to want to do is lock our rotation on the X and Y axis. And we want to make sure that there's a few things that don't collide together. Now, one of them being is we want to make sure our capsule does not collide with the static meshes. You can actually see right now that it is going to collide with everything. Now, this is actually going to be a first step for interacting with things anyways, so this will actually be it nice and easy. I want to make sure that this is overlap all dynamic on both static meshes. Now, we'll know that this works too because when we go into our player right here, we should be able to hit simulate, and it should just fall down to the ground, and it does. Now, in addition to this, as a quick test, I'm actually going to stop this, and I want to go over here into event graph. What I'm going to do real quick is I just want to remove this for 1 second. If it'll let me delete it. Oh, I'm having a little bug, I think, with the Unreal Engine. I don't know if any of you guys have ever had this issue, but let me try this. Let me close that, reopen our base player. Sometimes that's all that's needed. Yeah, that's all that's needed. So if we go and compile and save, we should be able to hit simulate. And what I want to do, we can see it falls down to the ground. And actually real quick, I also want to turn on our collision so we can see what our collision looks like. I want to make sure that this behaves correctly. Show collision, there we go. Sometimes you just need to enable it, or disable it and re-enable it in order for that to work. Okay, click on that. If we come right on over here into our capsule component, what I want to do is scale up our half height, scale down our half height, and you can actually see that it does behave perfectly fine. So this should now work fine in regards to gravity. So we should not need to do anything more there. Let me go and reconnect this, and at the very least, I now know that this can be removed. All of our gravity is going to work fine. And I really want to give a huge shout out to the guy who gave me that recommendation. Thank you a lot. I was honestly just being really stupid with that. And that was entirely my fault. And I really should have thought that through a little more clearly when I was doing that, I think. Okay. So, one more quick thing. Actually, you know, we'll leave this. This all works still for our player movement. None of this will need to be changed. I might come back and integrate the character's default movement, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. I think all of this is going to work great. All right. So let me go and close a bunch of these functions that we do not need. Awesome. All right, now that we have all this out of the way, all of our little fixes, let's go ahead and get into interacting with things in the environment. Now, more specifically, what I want to focus on right now is being able to grab and pick things up, because that's going to be the more important thing for us. So, in order for this to work, what we're going to do is let's go ahead and open up our blueprints. And what I want to do first is set up a couple of inputs for our grips. And I'm actually going to change these naming schemes a little bit, just so I know what they are. I'm just going to add an IA underscore to them, so that way I know that they're input actions. And what I want to do is go into here, and we want to create a couple more input actions. We're going to call one grip left, and then we're going to duplicate this and do a grip right. Okay, now we shouldn't really need to do anything to either of these. These should both work just fine. I don't think we need to do anything. Bool is fine. The only thing we might want to do later on, and I don't think I'm going to worry about this right now, is we can have these be Axis 1Ds. On most VR controllers, the grip is actually a... it's got a range. I'm brain farting on the name. It's got a range. It's not necessarily true or false, but we're just going to leave that for now. Now let's come over here into the XR mapping context. And actually, while I'm here, I just remembered I set up the WASD keys for all this. I don't think I need these anymore. You know, I'm going to leave them for now. In case you're curious too, I think I went through that in the last video. This is how they're set up. My W has a couple modifiers, A has a single modifier, our S has a single modifier, and D can just be put in without any modifiers. Okay, let's see, let's do our grip left and our grip right. And we're gonna do the same deal. I'm just gonna stick with the Oculus controller for now. So let's do Oculus Touch, left grip for our grip left, perfect, and right grip, where is it? Oculus Touch, right grip for our right grip. This might actually need to be changed to Axis. I'm trying to remember. This might need to be changed to Axis. I could be wrong, so I'm going to leave that open in case we need to come back to that. And then let's do IA underscore XR underscore grip left. And then IA underscore XR underscore grip right. Perfect. Let's go and compile and save that. Make sure all this works perfectly fine. Perfect. I actually wonder, can I refresh this? I guess not. I was going to see if I could change that so that way it's all uniform, but oh well. Awesome. So we now have our grip all ready to go. Okay. Now, for this to work, there's a couple ways we can go about doing our grip. And this kind of changes depending on how you want to do things. Now, the way that I'm going to do this is I want to go based off of our hand's position and just kind of do like a little sphere around our hand. And the main reason I want to do this is because what I want to do later on when we go to do things like open and close doors or cabinets or anything like that, I actually want to detach the mesh from our motion controller and have it loosely follow, and I think that'll end up working a little bit better, and I have a couple of ideas how I'll go about doing that, and I'll play around with that a little bit before we get to that part. But what that is going to be my plan right now is I want to use the hand to actually determine what we can grab. So in order to do this, let's go back into our event graph and let's actually set up a couple functions for this. Let's do grip left. Let's do a release left, and then I'm going to do a grip right and a release right. Okay, just like that. Okay, and let me actually, I'm going to move this into a new category. We're going to call this grip. Grip, grip, and grip. Perfect. So we have a grip left. Perfect. Okay. All that should work fine. Let's go back here into the event graph. And what I want to do is triggered is going to happen when we actually start the grab, and completed is going to happen when we release it. So what I want to do is we're going to take these, and it's just going to be real simple. Connect that to triggered, connect that to completed, and then we're going to do the same thing over here, grip right, release right, and then we'll do, did not mean to move that, triggered, completed, and then we can actually minimize those down. I like to do that just to try and keep it looking somewhat clean. Actually, I'll move that down there. Try and keep things a little bit separated. And actually, I'm going to do this too. Grip. I want to start having some comments here and there just to make things look a little clean. Ooh, that's not what I meant to do. I don't know how I did that. Let's do highlight all this, and I'm just going to call this movement, and I'm going to move this right up here. Cool. I'm actually going to do this one too. Positioning. Actually, let me... a couple little last minute thoughts here. Positioning. Perfect. Okay, so let me move both these down real quick. Just so it's not in there. Cool. All right. A little extra work out of the way. All right, now let's go ahead. Let's go back into the viewport. And what we could do is we could just have like a sphere that spawns around the player. What I think I'm actually going to do, because I like to visibly see how our collision sphere is going to look, is I am going to create a sphere collision, and I'm just going to call this grip sphere left, and then I'm going to copy that, paste that there, make sure it's attached to our right hand mesh. And part of the reason I want to do this too is in doing it this way, we can actually attach it to a specific socket as well. So not only can we see what the size is going to be, but if we have like our hand is down here at the wrist, we can maybe have an additional socket right up here where like more in the center of our hand, and then attach the sphere to that socket instead. And you can actually change the parent socket right over here. There's no sockets on this static mesh right now, but if there was, I could click on this little select a different parent socket, and it would basically immediately snap over there. You might also have to like hit a couple reverts back here, but it would generally just snap right back there, and you can see what all that's going to look like. So let's start with our grip left now. Before we get into that, actually, let me do a couple things. So let's come down here. I'm actually going to create a new blueprint section. I'm going to call this Interactable. Okay, and the first thing I want to do is I want to create an actor component, blueprint class. I want to create, actually, do I want to do actor or scene component? So, I was thinking this through. Instead of doing, I don't think there's anything we can really use for like sphere collisions or anything like that I am aware of. So, we're going to do the things this way. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do a scene component, and I'm going to call this interactable, actually we'll call it interact components, just like that. Okay, let's go and make sure everything is saved, of course. Let's actually set up here before we go back into the player. First thing I want to do is I'm going to disable tick. We don't need tick enabled. And I think I mentioned in the first video that there's times where I like to disable tick because it's not really necessary. And then let me see here. I think I'm actually going to keep most of the logic in the player. I think the one thing I want to do is I want to go into functions and I want to do grab components, or actually we'll do holding components. Okay, and I'm actually going to change this. That's not supposed to be a function. I meant to do that as a variable. That was stupid. Variable, and we're going to do holding component. And I'm going to change this to a scene component right there, object reference. We're going to make this public, and I'm actually going to do this under, I'm just going to call this info, because this, I don't think there's going to be a ton of things, but there's going to be, I think I'm going to come back into here a few times. There's going to be some information that I'm going to want to keep in order to make sure that things are interacting correctly. And I think that'll all work fine. Cool. So let's come right on over here, and in our grip left, we'll start here. This will actually be mostly the same between our grip left and our grip right, but actually I probably could have even merged this into one character, or one function. It doesn't matter. Let's go ahead. Now I'm overthinking this a little bit, I think. You know what? I'm actually gonna do this. Grip, release. I'm going to delete that, yes, and I'm going to delete that, yes, and we're going to do two inputs. We'll do a mesh, and we're going to do a collision, sphere, collision, perfect. We'll do an object reference there, and then I'm going to change this to a static mesh. Okay. And compile, save. I know. Okay. I'm gonna delete that. Oh, come on. Okay, I think it's throwing a bit of a fit. Hold on, let me close this, reopen our player. It should let me delete it now. There we go. Perfect. Let's go and open this a little bit more. And I'm actually going to just copy this and bring this down. And it's going to be the same thing. Triggered, completed. We'll minimize this. And I'm just going to make sure that these both look nice and organized, at least mostly. And then what we're going to do is grab our left-hand mesh, left-hand grip sphere. Same thing over here. We'll grab a right-hand mesh, right-hand grip sphere. Perfect. And then we'll feed that static mesh. Oh, you know what? That's why. It's supposed to be a static mesh component reference. So let's connect those real quick. Let me change this. This is supposed to be a static mesh component. Perfect. There we go. And then back into here. Same deal. Mesh. Mesh. And then let me organize all this. I don't know why this reverted back. We'll do that. Perfect. Go ahead and expand all this. Awesome. Yeah. Okay. Got a lot of the initial setup out of the way. Okay, let's go back here into grip. And what I want to do is we're going to grab our mesh. Actually, not our mesh. We'll grab our collision, get overlapping actors. And I won't do any class filter on it or anything, but we're going to do a for each. Go and put that right in there. And I want to do a closest interactable. This is in case there happens to be more than one interactable in the space. I want to get the closest one to the hand and use that one. And let me do, I'm actually going to change this to an interact component. Object reference, okay. And then we're going to go through all these. Has Actually, we might need to do get components by class. We'll do an interactable. Not interactable. Interact component. Actually, I'm gonna do this a slightly different way. We're gonna do get components by class. Interact component. There's actually gonna be a reason I'm gonna come back to this later on. For each loop, place that there. Actually, I'm gonna do this real quick. I want to set this as primary and add in a Boolean that's gonna go into info. I will explain that at a later time. That's gonna come into handy when you start doing two-handed weapons, but I'm not gonna worry about that right now. And actually, real quick, I'm actually gonna make that a default as a true. Okay. Get primary. Actually, let's do this first. Let's get a length. If this length is greater than or equal to, actually, let's do this is equal to 1, because we might want to do slightly different things. Okay, so let's do if this is equal to 1. That means that we have one interact component. That means we have one that we can deal with. Let's go ahead and set, not set. We're going to get our closest interactable. We're going to convert this to validate get. If this is not valid, we're simply just going to set our closest interactable to the first one that we get. So that's going to go right in there. If this is valid, what I want to do is get world location. We will get the world location of here, world location. And to keep things simple, we can actually do this when we're in a function. We can actually do get mesh. And if I scroll down all the way, we should be able to get the mesh for this function specifically. And it just kind of keeps things nice and simple. Perfectly fine. Actually, is that working correctly? Hold on. Did I get the right one? Get mesh. I don't think I have another mesh to get, right? I didn't. Oh, I did. Okay, that got the character mesh. Okay. I just realized that I grabbed the wrong one. Okay, make sure it has this little function icon there. That means it's part of this function. And then let's do the same thing, get world location. And then what I want to do is we're going to get distance vector between these two, and then we will duplicate these two, and I want to feed in the world location from here. So let me organize this so you can see exactly what we're doing. So we're getting the interact component, because right now we're only assuming that there's only ever going to be one. We're not going to do anything if there's more than one at the moment. So we're going to do this. We're going to grab our interact component. If there's no closest interactable already set, we set it. If there is, we get this interact component. We get its world location. We get the distance from this to the mesh, and we get the distance between the current closest interactable and our mesh. And then what we want to do is we want to check to see if this distance is less than this distance. You can also do less than or equal to, that works too. Doesn't fully matter. And then we can pass that into the is valid there. Okay, this is kind of correcting itself a little bit now. If this is less, then what we're going to do is we're going to set the closest interactable to, again, this one right there. Okay, and again, this get here is actually from our interact component, so we're actually setting the current interact component. What I want to do later on is if we have more than one, we're going to assume that this is something like a two-handed weapon, and we want to basically position our hand. First one will go on the grip, second one will go on the muzzle or wherever it needs to go for the second grip for a little bit more stability. Once this is all completed, what we want to do is let me actually do this. Well, I'm going to create a function. No, I'm not going to do a function. There's actually a reason I don't want to do a function. In our interact component, I want to create an event dispatcher called grabbed. Actually, we'll call this on grabbed. And I want to create another one called on release. Perfect. And then what we want to do is, actually something I did almost forget. We need a couple of components here. Let me create a left grab. And then we're going to create a right grab. Actually, this don't need to be public. I don't know why I started making those public. Same thing. We're going to give this its own section called grip. And then the first thing we want to do is we want to come right in here. Set left grab. Set right grab. Perfect. Oh, this is why I wanted to do left and a right. All right, I think we can still make this work. Okay, let's go and grab these two, and we'll grab our left-hand mesh. If this is equal to our, let me go and grab our mesh from up here. God dang it. That'll go right in there. If this, hold on, I need to remember how I'm doing this. I think what I can do is get our left-hand mesh. If these two are equal, then that means it's our left hand. Let me see. I should be able to set components. Can I not set it? Okay, I guess I can't. Okay, we'll do it this way then. Let's do a branch. This is going to come down here to complete it as well. So let's go and do this. Then what we want to do is actually, let's do get closest interactable, because we need to make sure that this is actually valid first. We don't really want to do this otherwise. So if this is in fact valid, what we want to do is come down here. We will set, if this is true, we're going to set our left grab to the closest interactable. Try to grab that to our closest interactable. Otherwise, we're going to get our right grab and set it to our closest interactable. And then what we're going to do is we're going to grab this and call on grabbed. Okay. And the reason we're doing things this way is there's going to be situations where, for example, we might have something that's physics simulated. So for example, if we grab a cube or something like that, just as an example, it might have physics simulated. And if that happens, what we want to do is we want to disable physics on that item and then re-enable it when we release the item, and so that way we can hold it correctly. That might not always be the case. There might be certain items that we grab that we don't want to simulate physics on, or that we want to have different sort of interactions with, things like that. So we're going to just call this event dispatcher, which we can then use within an interactable actor. And I'll show you how that works here in a second. We've got our grip done. Release is fortunately a lot easier. We're just going to come right down here, and I'm just gonna again do the same thing. Static mesh, call this mesh. Let me just make sure that I think I did the same mistake actually. Nope, I did static mesh component. Perfect. Same thing. Left hand mesh will go down there into release. Right hand mesh will go down there into release. Let me actually expand that just a tiny bit. Perfect. Now here in our release, what we want to do is basically the same thing. If this is equal to our left-hand mesh component, we'll do a branch. And then first thing we're going to want to do is not set. Actually, we will need a set too, but let me first do the get for both of them. We'll convert both these to validated get because we want to make sure that this is valid first. Okay, so there and there. If this is valid, we don't really want to do anything if it's not valid. It really doesn't matter. We're going to call on release, and then we are going to set our left grab back to null, so that way we can no longer interact with it. And we're going to do the same thing with our right as well. We'll call our on release, and then we're going to set our left grab back to null as well. Perfect. Actually, there is going to be one more thing that I want to do when we come right on up here on our on grabbed. I actually want to add an input onto this call, and I want this to be a static mesh component. We'll call this mesh. And I'm actually going to pass through a second one as well called socket. Hold on. Let me double check something real quick. If we event graph, if we grab our static mesh, get socket, or no, attach actor to component. This is going to be a name. Okay, I didn't think it was string. I wanted to double check. So I want to change this to name, and we're going to call this socket, just like that. Perfect. And actually, I'm going to do this as actually, we'll come back to the Interactable in a second. Back here in our BP, let me go and close release because we're all done with that for sure. Down here, what we want to do is we want to pass in those meshes. So left-hand mesh there, right-hand mesh there into our calls. And then what I'm going to do as well is I'm going to create a socket called grabs, or I'm going to create a variable called grab socket. We'll make this a name, pass that right in there. And this I want to be public. I'm actually move this up to the top. And then we are going to run this into both of these. And the idea is that if we have a socket that we want to connect these to, say for example, we want a pistol to be in a slightly different offset compared to a sniper or something like that, we can come right down here and we can set those sockets for everything. I might actually end up coming by and modifying this for a later reason, but I'm not going to worry about that at the moment. And that should all work fine. So we're all done with our player now. We have our grab set, all that. What I'm going to do is here, before we go on any further, event begin play, and I want to do I just want to create a binding for our on grabbed. This might not be necessary, but I'm going to do this anyway. Not create event, custom event. Grabbed, and I'm actually going to set our holding component to the mesh we get through. And the reason we're doing this is we want to make sure that we can't like grab, and this is just for general information in case we need to reference it, you know, what is holding our player or what is holding this object for whatever reason. I don't know if this is really going to be a necessity, but I prefer to have this not need it than need it not have it, I suppose. Perfect. So that completes our interact component. Now let's actually set up something that we can grab. So let's come right on over here into our interactable, and we're just going to create a nice simple actor. And I'm just going to call this actually, I'm not going to call this test. I'm going to call this debug underscore grab. We'll call it grab cube. Okay, this is just so we can test it and make sure everything is working just fine. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is I'm going to drop in a cube. I won't worry about the scaling or anything like that. This is just supposed to be a debug thing so I can scale this up and down as much as needed. And then I want to grab an interact component. Okay, and that should, we'll leave it right there. I think that's fine. And actually, I'm going to promote this cube to be the parent as well, the parent component, the root component. And then what I want to do is, so you remember those on grabbed and our on release things that we created? If we click on our interact component and come right down here to the bottom, you can see that there's an on grabbed and there's an on released. Exactly what we need. So we can do an on grabbed, and we'll do an on released, and it basically creates events exactly like we're used to. It's nice and simple. We don't really need to worry about it too much or anything like that. So what we're going to do is on grabbed. We're going to keep this nice and simple. I'm just going to attach actor to component. And actually something real quick too, I'm actually going to simulate physics on this cube. Let me actually check something real quick. This is a physics actor. I actually want to change this real quick. I want to make sure that this is going to overlap with the pawn. I don't want this interfering with the pawn, and I don't want the pawn interfering with this. Nice and simple. So when we grab, we're going to attach this to our parent. We will keep the location and the rotation Actually, we won't do that as keep world. We're going to snap both these to target. It's going to make it a little easier, make it look a little nicer. I'm actually going to attach in that socket, even though we're not really using that at the moment. And scale, we're going to keep as world. And then what I want to do is I'm going to grab this, set simulate physics, and we're going to disable physics. Nice and simple. On release, what we're going to do is we are simply going to detach from actor, and this basically just detaches this actor from anything it is currently attached to. All this is going to be set to keep world, and then we're going to grab this again, and this time we're going to be re-enabling physics on the release. So it'll be nice and simple. Now, last thing to do is to test this. So I'm just going to, let me place a few things in the world so that way we can actually test this real quick. Move that up just a little bit. We will grab our debug cube, and let me scale this down just a little bit so I can actually see what it's doing. Let's do, I like that. Let's do maybe like 0.1. I think 0.1 is fine. Yeah, I think that's fine. I do want to give this just a different mesh, so that way I can see what it's doing. Let me see if this kind of works a little better. I think that works a little bit better, so that way we can at least see it. And then before I plug in the headset, if I just hit simulate, it should just kind of fall down, hit the ground, and it looks like it does just that. So nice and simple. Last thing to do is to go ahead and plug in the headset, and we'll see how this works. Unfortunately, I'm still having a little issues with my left controller. I might end up having to dig out my old Quest 2 controllers just to have something that works. Something I do want to check that did pop in my head before we start playing around with the interactable stuff is we have, or we should at least have, collision working with the ground. And it does seem to be that way. You can see that now the collision is working just fine with the ground. It is, or hopefully you can, I think I need to get like a, I think I really need to work on stop hitting that. But in addition to that, we can grab that, drop it. And so now we have a very simple cube that we can grab and drop, and we can apply this to other things in the future. So what I'm going to do in the future is either modify the interactable component or create a child class of it, so we can actually do things like hit the trigger button on it. And then what we can do is start applying that to things like guns, and possibly even having things like doors that will simulate physics and have the mesh follow along. Like I said, I have a few plans for getting that to work, and I think that they will all work great. It'll just be a matter of getting all this to implement it in, I guess. With that, we now have a very simple way that we can start interacting with objects. This will work as a very great base for the next video when we start interacting with things like guns and being able to fire them off, as well as having additional things like doors, drawers, and hinges, little simple things like that that will allow for us to actually grab and open up different objects within the world. With that, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next reality.